John, thank you. Very good to be with you again. And I just have to ask, not being here on every occasion, John, what was the name of that store? Somehow I'm expecting John Bassmar to do anything without getting that commercial in there. That has to be always a fundraiser before you do the happy stuff. Looks like a silhouette. I'm probably seeing it best if I look like a silhouette. Well, as Carol said, I came in the door today not knowing exactly which topic I was going to be speaking on. I know last time when I was here we spoke about the economy as a whole, and I don't recall exactly when that discussion was, but I know I oftentimes during that general period would give a discussion on the economy and people think, oh, it seems awfully pessimistic. I hate to say it, but I think I was almost a bit of an optimist. The way things have gone, certainly have gone downhill a lot. And so today I kind of walked in the door expecting you to tell you a little bit of the story that I've been involved with, which is the Chrysler case. As you may know, Indiana was the only state that ended up being the only person that had the fiduciary responsibility to try to stop the Chrysler bankruptcy. We took it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, where unfortunately on a technicality the court decided not to hear the case. What Paul Harvey, the late Paul Harvey might say would be the rest of the story. I'll tell you, I'll give you a little tip here. We're going back to the U.S. Supreme Court. We have a unique little opening in the law because the court took our case. They initially issued a stay, so we have standing in front of the Supreme Court for 90 days. And now that the sale of Chrysler has taken place, we know we cannot undo the sale. We can't unring the bell, but we feel that we certainly have some points to be heard. And without going into the whole story, I just have to tell you, because I know we've got a lot of coverage in this part of the state as well, but for all the criticism I've taken from the United Auto Workers, from various newspapers, from Chrysler Corporation, from Congressman Donnelly, who represents the area around Kokomo where Chrysler is located, for all the criticism of Senator Bayh, for all the testimony given at the bankruptcy court, the District Court of New York, the United States Second District Court of Appeals, and even in the United States Supreme Court, not one single time has anybody ever challenged us on our 3 points of law. Not once. And if we can get 4 justices to sign a petition that we will take to them late in August, then they will have a chance to rule on the law. And call me a rosy-cheeked optimist, but I have to believe at the very least Justice Thomas, Scalia, Alito, and Chief Justice Roberts want to deal with the issues of law. So if those 4 sign the petition, you will hear of us again going to the Supreme Court. So we're not going to give up the fight until we've tried every avenue to win money back for the retirees in Indiana. Having said all that, and I told Carol and Mike, it's probably better that I speak about Lincoln because I'm speaking all the time on the Chrysler situation. And every time I tell the tale, I get angry. So what I'm about to share with you is the discussion of Mr. Lincoln instead. And that's probably good therapy for me right now because I've gone through so much with the Chrysler case. I guess by way of background, I should explain here, I am a huge buff of American history. I'm not a historian. The historians are the people who read the old letters and do the original research. That's not me. But some 30 years ago, I gave myself the goal to read at least 10 pages of American history every night. And can't say I've done it every night, but I've certainly done it most nights. And the more I have read, the more I become absolutely fascinated with that huge towering figure of the 19th century, Abraham Lincoln. He is without a doubt our greatest president. He's faced the greatest struggles, the greatest adversity, and obviously met what his primary goal was, which was to keep us as one nation instead of 2. I have to tell you, this year, February 12th of this year, was his 200th birthday. And I really expected, because I'm such a fan of Lincoln personally, that there would be this huge national celebration of the 200th birthday of Abraham Lincoln. It didn't really happen. In fact, there was only one notable TV show about it, and that Rob and I were talking about. It's a strange tale, true story, of how Lincoln was kidnapped after his death, when there was an attempt made to steal his body from the grave in Springfield. Now, by an ironic twist of history, February 12, 1809 was also the birthday of Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin got at least 3 TV documentaries that I saw, and yet Lincoln got none. And I'm a scientist by nature. I mean, I get Charles Darwin, but I do not understand why Lincoln was so overlooked. Obviously, hundreds of books have been written about Lincoln. It is said he is more quoted than any person who has ever spoken the English language. More words have been written about Lincoln than any person who's ever lived except for Jesus Christ himself. So to talk to you in just a few minutes about Lincoln is impossible. But what I want to do is just cover 3 quick topics of how I think, pure speculation on my part, but if Mr. Lincoln were alive, how he would want to be remembered. And the thing that I've learned in studying Lincoln is he was a very, we might say, down-home, humble kind of person. He knew he wasn't the perfect person. Even though today we see him as this 19th century icon, he was pretty flawed at times, and he knew that. And I think in telling the tale of Lincoln, you got to tell a little bit of both sides, so I want to do that. If Lincoln were here today, I think one way he would want to be remembered is as a person of integrity, because he took it very, very seriously. His father was a strict Baptist. In fact, that was part of the reason they moved from Kentucky over to Spencer County. By the way, it wasn't really Spencer County. They moved to Perry County. It's today's Spencer County. It used to be all of Perry County. But they came across the river in part because Thomas Lincoln didn't want his son growing up where there was such a evil as slavery, which there was, of course, on the other side of the river. He imparted to Abraham Lincoln this great value of integrity, to the point that there are stories after stories of how Lincoln kept his word. One of the best is how, shortly after they had moved to Illinois, Abe Lincoln was 21, he went into business with a gentleman by the name of William Barry. And he knew he didn't want to be his farmer, and by the way, his father was very disappointed. His father really expected him to be out there breaking the sod along with him, and that wasn't what Abe Lincoln wanted to do. He wasn't really sure, so he went into business with Mr. Barry as a merchant. They had a general mercantile store. And the two of them worked together for almost a year. They borrowed a bunch of money, put in the inventory, and it wasn't too long and Mr. Lincoln figured out, yeah, this isn't really what I want to do. Sold his part of the business and got out. And about 6 months after that, Mr. Barry, who, by the way, seems a bit of a drinking problem, decided he didn't want to be in the business either, and he skipped town. Abraham Lincoln had no obligation, legally, some would say morally, to cover any of the debts of the Lincoln Berry store because he had exited the business months before. And yet, Abraham Lincoln took on that $1,300 of debt. $1,300 of debt back then was a huge pile of money. Lincoln later referred to it as his own national debt. He took it on himself to pay back $1,300 just because his name had been associated with the store. And it was from that, it took him 20 years to do it, by the way, and it was from that that the nickname Honest Abe was derived. Because everybody around New Salem came to understand Lincoln was going to do whatever it took to keep his word. If Lincoln were around today, I have absolutely no doubt on this, he would want to be remembered as a lawyer. Because Abraham Lincoln loved the law. Shortly after he left that store with Mr. Berry, that's when he got his first introduction to the Blackstone Law Journal, which is an English publication, the basis of all modern English law and subsequently American law. He read it from cover to cover to cover to cover. Back then there were no law schools, but you had to apprentice with a lawyer. And after he read it and read it and read it, he began his apprenticeship. In no time at all was practicing law. He loved the practice of law. But the truth is, Abraham Lincoln was never destined to be on the Supreme Court. He was a very prosperous lawyer. But he wasn't one of those people who was always out there on the leading edge of legal theory. In fact, just 2 years ago, a historian from the University of Anderson, northeast of Indianapolis, wrote a wonderful book called Lincoln the Lawyer. He hired a team of graduate students to go around all of Illinois, go through all the courthouse records, and find every case Abraham Lincoln had ever been involved with. There were more than 6,000 of them. Wow. But when you review those cases, you come to this startling point. If Abraham Lincoln were alive today, he would be one of those lawyers